Okay, so I think I'm not gonna say I think I let me backtrack. Hello everybody, my name is Kelly, aka Kellastico, if you didn't already know. But I was just it's been in my mind lately, especially since Monday. I'm kinda straight to the chase, sorry guys. Anyway, so Monday, I don't know why I was thinking about the fourth dimension. It's been in my brain. I think because I know why actually. I think I know why. It's gonna make me sound crazy, so bear with me now. Please follow every step if you possibly can, so I can explain everything. So I'm gonna go back to the history, and then I'm gonna explain what I'm about to explain and why I turned on this camera. So I was thinking about the fourth dimension. I think Monday, and today is Tuesday, October 19th, 2021. So on October 18th or October 17th, one of the 2 days, excuse me, I had a little snippet about the fourth dimension. And I was kind of, I kind of dismissed it on that Sunday or Monday. And then Monday came along and I was working and I was thinking of physically, like thinking about the fourth dimension. So I looked it up and I was like, okay, what is that? What does that look like, really? You can't really actually experience it, but you can possibly get a gauge of what it looks like. So I looked it up and people were talking about the Tesseract. And if you know from Marvel, there's a whole thing about the Tesseract. Cool. So then it started making me thinking about more dimensions. So I started looking up videos literally just now. I'm in my towel because I just got out the shower. And I was just thinking about all these things. So anyway, this brings me back to why was I thinking about the fourth dimension? So I was reading my Bible in the morning. I think it was First Peter. It was a chapter in First Peter. I want to say First Peter chapter 2. But basically, in that whole book, basically it was saying how to God 2,000 days is one day, and to one day is 2,000 days, or one day equals 1,000 days, or one day equals 1,000 years, and 1,000 years could equal one day. So then I got my mind racing a little bit, but not too much at this point. Up until I think this morning, which is October 19th. Then I started reading again, and then it was still stuck in my head. Fourth dimension, fourth dimension. So then I looked it up. And I had my own hypothesis of other dimensions outside of it. My bad. Outside of it. So then no. I'm back in track. Okay, so I was thinking about the fourth dimension. And I was constantly thinking about it, but I could not explain it necessarily. So then I watched a video on YouTube. This high schooler was explaining the fourth dimension and how 3D is width, depth, and height. 2D is width and height. 1D obviously is one line. 2D width and height. 3D width, height, and depth. As you can see, I don't know if you can see that, but width, height, and then depth, I guess, or you could put this as depth, width, height, and then depth. And then when you do 4D, that's like another right angle, right? And that I would call an in and out. And I was looking up, and there's a guy named Carl Sagan, and he was explaining that basically. So the fourth dimension, I guess you could say, is in and out. It's the right angle of each one. So I was thinking about, okay, if there's a fourth dimension, somebody mentioned that, okay, there's infinite dimensions. And I was like, okay, what's the fifth dimension then? So the fifth dimension is a right angle of the fourth dimension. So I think that part, bear with me, I think that fifth dimension is the thing that can control things, can control things or overtake things. Let me say that. I think the fifth dimension is the dimension that you can overtake things. When I was taking a dump, I'm not gonna lie to you. I was taking a dump and I was thinking about it just came up in my head. I was like, fifth dimension, okay. Fifth dimension is intention. And I kept saying fifth dimension is intention. Fifth dimension is intention. Fifth dimension is intention. And I was wondering, okay, what does that mean though? So then I started praying. I'm not gonna lie to you. I started praying. I said, God, please help me understand what the fifth dimension is and what the fifth dimension. I honestly think that He gave it to me. So I think the fifth dimension is intention. So fourth dimension, you can go in and out. Fifth dimension, you can control what is going in and out. Or overtake, really, because everything is independent. But I think you can overtake within the fifth dimension. Fourth dimension, you can implant ideas. You can And I think that's what our brain is. I think we're functioning all. Oh, let me check again. Side note, I think we are, as humans, we are experiencing all the dimensions that are actually in existence. We're just living and experiencing 3 dimensions. So I think that in the 4th dimension, you can implant thoughts into people's head, but you can't control them. You can implant things because you can go in and out. You can go in and out. But there's always a limitation to each dimension. Keep that in mind. And I think in the 5th dimension, it's broader than the 4th dimension, but this time you can overtake things. So once you overtake things, then I think that's where, personally, what I think, where angels possibly live. But they can only experience the 4th dimension. But no, they live the 5th dimension, as in they can overtake, aka possession, but they can only see the 4th dimension. And what brought me to why I think they're in the 5th dimension is because there's a Bible verse that said, God, I'll look it up, but it said God only made man a little lower than the angels. So I'm thinking, okay, where lower is not lower as in probably stature or whatever. I think lower is probably dimension. So I think the dimension is where we're lower in. We're experiencing a level lower than the angels, and that's why angels are a little more mighty than humans, because we're a little bit lower, and our interaction with different dimensions is limited because we can only go from 3 down. We can't go from 3 up. But at the same time, we do live in all the dimensions combined, and that's where God also is, because obviously He created it, if you believe that. I can prove that for a little bit, but I'll get to that a little bit later. So I think 4th dimension is implementing, and I think that angels live in the 5th dimension. They live in the 5th dimension, but they can only interact in the 4th dimension, or they can only experience the 4th dimension. So explaining that, each dimension can only interact with, they can only experience a dimension below them. So for instance, humans, we experience 2D. Like once you face something, you can only see the front. You can't see the depths of something. But you know there's depths, because obviously if you peel back somebody's skin, you know that, there's muscle, there's blood, there's all these things. So we live in the 3D, but we can only experience 2D. Not that we can't interact with 3D, we just can only experience 2D. So I see this camera lens I'm looking at. I can't see inside of it, but I know an inside exists because I live in the 3D dimension. So if I do take it apart, I can understand that, okay, there is depths to this. Now, what I think about the 4th dimension is that you can go in and out, but you can't overtake like you can in the 5th dimension. So if you can go in and out, that means that I can go through here and I can see the depths, and I can interact with the depths, and I can see the depths of something, but I can't overtake it. Now, what I think about the 5th dimension is that overtaking stage. And that's why I think that angels exist, because possession exists. All these things, God comes into your life. So that I'm gonna explain that too. But so 5th dimension, basically, you can interact and overtake something in all the dimensions and below. So if an angel moved the chair, or slightly moved something, or if something, that's what paranormal activity, I guess you could say, exists. You can move something because you can now overtake something in that dimension and interact with it. In the 5th dimension only. In the 4th dimension, you can only see through it because you experience it. You can experience it, but you can't interact. Hopefully that makes sense. Now going back to when God comes into your life, what I think is possibly it is, since God said I am, He is the great I am. That means if science is right and they say all dimensions are slightly bent, that means there's something outside of all dimensions, even though all dimensions are infinite. That means that there's something that exists outside of all the dimensions. Now, here's one thing that I was thinking about in the shower that just made me just want to get out and just like literally record this, is the fact of in each dimension there is space. And time only exists in dimensions, but they outside of dimensions, they don't exist. There's no such thing as time, because if God said, I am the great I am, and he is also the creator, there's literally nothing outside of dimensions, even though it's infinite dimensions. So with that being said, if God is the great I am, that means everything that let me backtrack again. He is the great I am. So that means everything, he can interact with everything and anybody and overtake and destroy all these things. So what I'm saying is, now here's my hypothesis of how God interacts with us humans. He uses space. He can overtake us, he can destroy us, but since God is so loving that he gives us free will, he doesn't. He says, hey, look, you know what? I'm going to interact with you, and if you give me permission to, I can change your life. I can literally change your life. Like, I can move things, I can interact with things, I can speak through you, I can do all the dimension stuff that is possibly in any dimension that I made, which is God. But he's so loving, he says, you know what? You can tell me if you want me or not. I'm going to I'm going to respect your free will. You just let me know. And I think that's when you ask God to come into your life, he interacts, like the demons can see, since they see the fourth dimension but live in the fifth, I think they can actually see who is God's child or not. Because in the fourth dimension, you would be able to go in and out, but there's always limitations to dimensions. So that means there's going to be a blockade in all those dimensions. And I don't think that you can overtake somebody who's a Christian if you ask God, who's outside of dimensions, to interact with you. So that means he can put his hand in any dimension that he wants to, and he just covers you. So then that means that if a demon wanted to overtake you, can't, because with that space that God interacts with, that he chooses to interact with, which is crazy to think about, he then wraps around your heart, or he basically says, okay, this is mine, so you cannot interact with this dimension. And that space is what God interacts with, because he chooses to interact with that, if that makes any sense. So that means when you ask God to get saved, and he says he brings his Holy Spirit, the Holy Spirit just goes through and covers you. And for me, when I got baptized, I felt like I was covered. When I got baptized, I kid you not, I felt like I was covered. Like, I feel like I didn't belong inside of the world. But here's where I'm thinking that this might call me crazy, but this is what I'm thinking, how Jesus interacts with us, or how God, even though they say it's the Trinity, right? Or the three in one, or one as three. I'm gonna go back on that. But anyway, I think that Jesus interacted with our dimension, and if God interacts through space, that means that he can take up space. So that means that he possibly, don't put me in on this, but he probably took up a space inside of our three-dimensional world, since he can interact with any dimension, and there's space in any dimension. He took space, and then when he died, he released the space. But then, I don't know. I'm not going to go into that depths, but I think there's science behind everything that's God is doing. And for me to understand the fourth dimension and the fifth dimension, I think that helped me so much. And I had to just like spit this out, even though it's long. I don't know what. I'm just going to upload this video raw, and then hopefully somebody can understand what I'm experiencing. Because I think this is such a breakthrough, and I really hope there's science behind this, because I think that there's science to God, and I think science is the study of what is. History is the. Let me backtrack again. History is the study of the past. Science is the study to what is. And then prophecy is to what is to become. And I'm going to explain this last bit. I think if you're in the fifth dimension, I think fifth dimension it could be teleportation, but it can't slow down time. Let me explain that. So imagine this was 4D, you can go in and out of this. 5D, like I said, I think you can overtake it, so you can move it if you want to. You can overtake whatever exists right here. And I'm saying, I was going somewhere with that. Fifth dimension. I forgot. I really forgot what I was just saying, but I was just so in the weeds. But anyway, I think fifth dimension, you can interact. And that's where you have possession. That's where God possibly puts his Holy Spirit. So then the demons know who was God's child or not. And I was just trying to explain the fifth dimension when it comes to time. That's what I was trying to do. It's the last bit. Fifth dimension, time still exists in all of these direct dimensions except for the ones that are outside of the dimensions, which is God. God doesn't affect time, or God isn't affected by time because time only exists in dimensions and God's outside of dimensions. So with that being said, fifth dimension can see the future but can't change the past. So that means that if you were to go it's like going almost at the speed of light. Like anything in the lower dimensions slows down. It slows down, but you can't change time in the fifth dimension. You can only see the future. That's what I'm gonna stop it right there. Hopefully these things make sense to somebody out there. I think that there's a science behind all this stuff that we're living, and hopefully this makes sense. I'll talk to you on the next one, whenever that is. Peace.